On the way home from gathering herbs, I stumbled upon a man, badly injured and on the verge of death. Suddenly, fragments of a plot came flooding back into my mind. I had saved him, only for him to forcefully take me as his concubine. After that, I was tormented by his childhood sweetheart. She caused my miscarriage, blinded me, broke my limbs, and eventually, I died a miserable death. Meanwhile, he lived a life of luxury, surrounded by wealth, a beloved wife, and concubines, happily ever after. Snapping out of it, I looked at the man begging me to save him. Without hesitation, I grabbed a huge rock and smashed it down on his head.
1.
An hour ago, I killed the male lead. On my way home from gathering herbs, I passed through a patch of overgrown shrubs and stumbled upon a man in luxurious robes, covered in injuries and barely breathing. Just as I reached out to help him, the moment my hand touched him, everything came back to me. Scenes played out like a shadow puppet show, flashing before my eyes like a raging flood. It turned out, I was the tragic female lead in a cruel and heartbreaking romance novel. I had saved the severely wounded Zhang Shua, the Marquis of Yongning, and cared for him attentively until he fully recovered. He promised to marry me, yet turned around and married his childhood sweetheart. Then he made me his concubine, trapping me in his household. He watched coldly as the maids and old servants mocked and humiliated me, letting them torment me day in and day out. He stood by as his sweetheart abused me, turning a blind eye as the bullying got worse and worse. In the end, after kneeling in punishment, suffering a miscarriage, losing my eyes, and having my limbs broken, I finally died. Only then did Zhang Shua wake up, as if he'd just booted up, riddled with a sudden, world-shaking regret. He killed everyone who had ever hurt me, then mourned for a few years, found a few women who looked like me as replacements, and lived out the rest of his life wealthy and surrounded by children but alone. Snapping back to the present, I quickly pulled my hand away like I'd touched something filthy and slapped my clothes twice to shake off the disgust. What kind of brain-damaged mutt wrote this steaming pile of dog shit and had the nerve to call it a redemption arc or tragic romance? Who the hell wrote this garbage, making murderers and abusers sound so refined and poetic? Just thinking about the future torment I'd go through, all thanks to this man in front of me, made me grind my teeth in fury. At that moment, Zhang Shua groaned faintly and slowly opened his trembling eyelids. Seeing someone nearby, he immediately pleaded weakly, "Help me, please." And then his arm dropped, and he passed out again. I sneered in my heart. "Help you? In your dreams." But I put on a concerned face and gently said, "Young master, hang in there just a little longer." Seeing no one else around, I lifted a stone from beside the shrubs and accidentally lined it up right with his head. Oops, my hand slipped and the rock came crashing down. In the blink of an eye, blood splattered everywhere. His skull cracked open and crimson blood flowed down the blades of grass into the dirt. The stench of blood filled the air. Just to make sure he was really dead, I gave him a few more solid smashes. Only when his head was completely deformed and his skull was shattered did I finally stop. Isn't putting him out of his misery also a form of salvation?
2.
I tossed aside the rock and wiped the sweat from my face, suddenly feeling lighter than I'd ever felt before. With a cheerful heart, I carried the herbs I'd just gathered down the mountain to the town's clinic and traded them for money. On the way home, I bought 2 pounds of roasted pork and a box of osmanthus cakes. The meat was crispy and smoky, the cakes soft and fragrant. Every bite was pure bliss. What kind of idiot was I to drag home some unknown man, cook and clean for him, run the house, and not get a single thing in return? Spending my own money on myself feels way better than bringing a man home just to cause me grief. A few days later, Zhang Shua's body was found in the back mountains by a hunter. The hunter noticed his fine clothes and guessed he must be a nobleman from some wealthy family, so he immediately reported it to the authorities. It was the peak of summer, and Zhang Shua's corpse had long since begun to rot, reeking of decay and crawling with maggots. Even from afar, the buzzing of flies could be heard. The authorities identified him from the jade pendant on his belt and the token he carried. It was the Marquis of Yongning, Zhang Shua, who had been missing for several days. When the old Marchioness of Yongning and Zhang Shua's childhood sweetheart, Su Anren, heard the news, they rushed over immediately. From the edge of the woods, you could hear the old lady wailing in anguish. My son. In the original story, not only did that old lady never thank me for saving her son, she blamed me for clinging to him. She nitpicked everything I did and rolled her eyes whenever she saw me. Now, faced with her son's rotting, maggot-infested corpse, she spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted on the spot. Su Enren stood off to the side, surrounded by maids and servants, her eyes brimming with tears. Just like before, she sobbed delicately, looking like a flower in the rain. Brother Shua, how could this happen to you? But before she could finish her pitiful speech, the stench hit her. She saw the maggots crawling all over Zhang Shua's body and instantly gagged. Ugh. She clamped a hand over her mouth and ran off to the side, gripping an old tree as she threw up uncontrollably, almost puking up her guts. With the help of the maids, she fled without even glancing back. The authorities took the body away, and the crowd slowly dispersed. I couldn't describe the satisfaction I felt inside. I turned and headed home, ready to roast the wild chicken I'd caught. As I stood thinking about what flavor to cook it in, I spotted 3 unexpected guests at the gate to my yard. 3. The person who came was none other than my second uncle, the one who had taken over our house and farmland after my father passed away. When he saw me return, he flashed a mouthful of large, yellow, crooked teeth, grinning with clear ill intentions. He greeted me enthusiastically. Ran, you're back? Second uncle rushed over. The moment he saw the wild chicken in my hand, his eyes lit up. Oh, you just caught this wild chicken? What a capable little niece you are. As he spoke, he reached out to grab it, but I subtly dodged his hand. I gave him a cold glance, silently telling him to cut the crap and get to the point. Only then did he awkwardly pull his hand back, chuckling sheepishly. In the courtyard, my stingy and mean second aunt was sitting with her precious son next to a basket, eating the wild grapes I'd picked from the mountains. Grape skins were scattered all over the ground. Zhao Yaozu's mouth was stained purple-red, and grape juice had splattered all over his clothes. He looked a complete mess. What are you looking at? Second aunt rolled her eyes at me and snapped harshly. You picked grapes and didn't even think to bring some to your younger brother? Always hogging everything for yourself. If you act like this after getting married, your mother-in-law will beat you to death, and rightfully so. Unbelievable. They eat my food, drink my water, and still treat me with such disdain. Without hesitation, I walked over and snatched the grapes from their hands. Hand them over. Your filthy mouth never stops, even when it's full. Even if I had to feed them to the dogs, I'd never give my things to her. I pointed at her and said each word with deliberate clarity. Don't worry. I'll never marry into a household like your in-laws. I'll live far better than you. I turned and took the grapes back into the house. Second aunt stomped her feet in frustration, about to hurl more insults, but second uncle gave her a look that made her shut up. Only then did the two reveal the real reason they were here. Dear niece, your second uncle has found you a marriage match. You're 16 now. Kids your age already have kids of their own. As he spoke, he fished out a dark, grimy cloth bundle from his pocket and unwrapped a few pieces of broken silver wrapped inside. Suddenly, a flood of memories rushed into my mind again, this time even more violently. Turns out, they weren't here to arrange a marriage at all. My second uncle was deep in debt and had no way out, so he decided to sell me. All he needed was for me to lower my guard so he could drug me and sell me off to a brothel. There, I was humiliated daily, forced to learn all sorts of tricks to please men. Any disobedience was met with beatings. They had countless cruel methods, slaps at best, whips at worst. Their whips were barbed. One lash could tear skin and cloth off in chunks. By then, even the most defiant girls would bow their heads and obey. I suffered like that for 2 long years. One day, during a secret outing, The crown prince noticed me. He bought my freedom and brought me back to his residence. From then on, he doted on me alone. Whatever good things he had, he gave to me first. He took me on outings, showed me the beauty of the capital, let me try every delicacy. I could pick whatever fine clothes and jewelry I wanted. Yet, this same man, who had once cherished me so deeply, refused to give me even a chance to defend myself when I was falsely accused by other concubines of having an affair. He ordered me beaten to death without a second thought, and went on to flirt with his new favorite without sparing me a glance. I was dragged into a secluded courtyard and beaten to death by the guards. But that wasn't the end of the story. Afterward, I was reborn. This time, I outwitted my despicable uncle and aunt, entered the palace through the selection, defeated the imperial consorts and even the empress, took revenge on the crown prince, and eventually became the empress myself, achieving the perfect ending. Snapping back to reality, I felt a heavy pain in my chest. I could still vividly recall the agony of the beatings. Can't I catch a break? I thought that once I took care of Zhang Shua, I'd finally be free of that vicious cycle. But I hadn't even caught my breath when another trap was already waiting for me. Am I the last woman left on Earth? Why does every misfortune have to come for me? This time, it's no longer some tragic dog-blood melodrama. This is a full-blown rebirth heroine revenge drama. To hell with it. I silently closed my eyes, mentally cursing the god of this world 18 generations deep. Seeing that I hadn't spoken for a long time, second uncle gave second Anna a look. Rolling her eyes, she reluctantly pulled out a small square piece of oiled paper from her coat. She opened it to reveal a deep black, soggy, fried sugar cake, ruined from being steamed. Don't say your second uncle doesn't care about you, she said. He made me get up early to fry this for you. Yaozu wanted one, and I didn't even let him have it. Then she handed the sugar cake to me. Here, eat up. Their eagerness made it obvious they'd drugged it. I remained silent for a long moment. Then, when I finally opened my eyes again, my resolve was firm. I suddenly glanced behind them and shouted in surprise. Look, a flying chicken. 4. Taking advantage of their momentary distraction as they looked back, I quickly grabbed a nearby wood-cutting knife. I swung with all my strength, aiming at my second uncle's neck. Blood immediately gushed out like a fountain. My second uncle clutched his wounded neck, face full of disbelief. Pointing at me, his voice trembling, he said, "You." Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed stiffly, no longer breathing. My second aunt screamed in terror, murder. Before she could finish, I raised the wood-cutting knife again. With a swift strike, as easily as slicing through melon, I cut her neck too. In an instant, both of them fell down lifeless. Zhao Yazu was so terrified he collapsed on the ground, trembling all over, like a leaf in the wind. His throat was dry, and he couldn't utter a word. He even wet himself from fear. Sister? Zhao Yazu stammered but couldn't finish a sentence. I ignored him, blood covering my face, and walked step by step toward him, holding the still dripping wood-cutting knife. Since we were all going to die, I might as well take a few with me. I wouldn't let these people live comfortably stepping on my blood and flesh. In the end, to prevent the couple from being lonely on the way, I kindly sent their son along with them. I really am too kind. After dragging the 3 corpses into a nearby abandoned cellar and cleaning up the scene, I cleaned the bloodstains and the various bloody tools in the courtyard. Then, I found the village chief and sold the house. To avoid any more shady characters getting hurt and waiting for me to save them, I decided to stay far away from this place. I heard that in recent years female workers were very popular in the capital. Noble families often hired female cooks, female doctors, and female embroiderers. I decided to try my luck there. On the way to the capital, I ignored 3 rich-looking, handsome young men lying wounded in the grass. I avoided begging spots and rejected 2 merchant caravans offering kind rides. Finally, on the 4th day, I arrived at the capital. I thought with the cooking and medical skills my father taught me, I could find a job there. But on the 2nd day after entering the capital, I was hit with a brutal blow. Just before I lost consciousness, hearing the sounds fade and my awareness blur, I couldn't help but curse everyone's ancestors.
5.
When I woke up again, I was surrounded by the chattering voices of people around me. Looking at the women in front of me, all dressed alike with matching hairstyles, I realized I had entered the palace. Soon after, I was assigned to the flower department, which was responsible for tending to all the flowers and plants in the palace. Life was busy and tight, not much different from life outside the palace. Every month I received 5 taels of silver, and upon leaving the palace at age 25, I would get an additional 50 taels as a retirement fund for my future. Though I didn't know who had brought me in, I was fairly content with everything for now. A few days later, news arrived that the princess, who had defended the western border, was returning to court. The emperor planned to hold a victory banquet for her. On the day of the banquet, everyone in the palace was busy preparing. When the banquet started, the emperor, empress, and consorts took their seats. Then the elegantly dressed princess entered with her maidservants. She was valiant and imposing, with sharp brows and fierce eyes, carrying herself with an air of authority. No wonder she had started martial arts at 10, joined the army at 12, and at 17, led victorious charges that killed the second prince of the western region. Truly a remarkable woman. By the fake mountain in the imperial garden, I took 2 bites of a packed pastry and was about to return to work. Just as I turned, a tall figure suddenly lunged forward and grabbed me tightly in his arms. I was shocked and struggled wildly. "Let go, who are you?" The person above sneered, tightening his grip on my hand, his hot, rapid breath spraying onto my neck. "You little thing, you're quite difficult to handle." Then he twisted my chin, threatening. "It took a lot of effort to get you in here to serve me well. There will be benefits for you." That voice. It was the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince snorted coldly. "If not." Hearing that, I stopped struggling. The scenes in my mind surfaced again. Soon, the Crown Prince would force himself on me, and the Empress would accuse me of seducing him. To protect her son's reputation, she would have me beaten to death with a staff. The Crown Prince would get a light scolding but remain unscathed. And I, a mere insignificant palace maid, would die unnoticed, far less precious than the Crown Prince. They would use my life to further their own agendas.
Why?
I just want to live well. Why is it so difficult and full of hardships? My face betrayed nothing, but my silver hairpin clenched tightly in my sleeve was ready to strike. Seeing I no longer struggled, the Crown Prince praised my sense. He unconsciously relaxed, leaning down to bite and lick my neck. The wet, sticky sensation was disgusting. The night was pitch black. The silver hairpin glinted fiercely. Snap! He suddenly stopped, clutching his neck. I quickly pulled out the hairpin, blood spurting from his throat. He went limp and collapsed, eyes wide open, trembling as he pointed at me. "You." Blood gushed out like a fountain through his fingers. I swiftly stabbed him again and again, each hairpin piercing vital spots. He never managed to call for help and finally collapsed stiffly, motionless.
6.
The Crown Prince's body was discovered the next morning by palace maids during their cleaning. When the Empress learned the dreadful news, she was so shocked she fainted, unable to catch her breath. At dawn, armed Genui guards clad in golden armor and silver boots stormed through the palace, overturning everything inside and out. Others were clueless, but I knew they were searching for the murder weapon used to kill the Crown Prince. In the end, they returned empty-handed. The Crown Prince's death plunged the Emperor into grief and rage, and he ordered the execution of all the Crown Prince's personal guards. White sails and paper money floated everywhere in the palace, casting an increasingly gloomy and oppressive atmosphere. The Empress fainted multiple times at the Crown Prince's coffin, but when she finally woke up, she sensed something suspicious about his death. Inside the palace, noble consort Shen bore the third prince, and virtuous consort bore the fourth prince. Both had influential families, so if the Crown Prince died, they would stand to benefit the most. With this in mind, the Empress ordered a search of noble consort Shen and virtuous consort's palaces, but unsurprisingly, nothing was found. Still unsatisfied, the empress believed her son was killed by the two consorts and ordered them to be punished with caning in front of the crown prince's coffin, causing chaos to erupt. Fortunately, the emperor arrived just in time to save noble consort Shin and virtuous consort and angrily reprimanded the empress. The crown prince's assassination left the emperor bitter and irritable. Many palace maids and eunuchs were executed during this time. It wasn't until the forensic examiner completed the autopsy and reported an unusual finding at the crown prince's wound that things began to change. The fatal wound on the crown prince's neck was caused by a sharp, pointed object, which is undoubtedly a hairpin. The wounds are scattered, with varying lengths and depths of penetration. A cold sweat ran down the examiner's forehead as he continued. From this, I deduced the killer is a woman, not skilled in combat, and the injuries were likely caused by a struggle and surprise attack. By this point, anyone with eyes could see the abnormality, especially combined with the crown prince's known lavish and lustful nature. The emperor's face darkened like the bottom of a pot. He slowly raised his eyes and spat a single word: investigate. The next day, news spread that the empress was searching for palace maids throughout every palace and apartment. Sueju returned from outside, whispering with others about everything she overheard. Did you hear? The empress is searching the entire palace for the maid who killed the crown prince. I paused in the middle of my work. Someone asked, "Who is it exactly?" Sueju shook her head, "Not sure, but all the pretty maids have been taken to Jingren Palace." I thought if I just kept my head down and didn't slip up, I could escape this disaster. But the next day, a eunuch brought me to Jingren Palace. 7. The empress sat regally in her phoenix robe on the phoenix throne, and Sueju knelt beside her, casting a smug glance my way. "Your Majesty, I personally saw Zhao Ran carry a silver hairpin she never parts with. It's very sharp." My heart sank, but I calmly looked up at the empress. Her appearance was a stark contrast to before. Now her eyes were bloodshot and lifeless, her face withered like an old crone, layered with heavy makeup clumps. Since His Highness passed, I have not seen that silver hairpin again. Therefore, I have strong reason to suspect Zhao Ran killed the crown prince. The empress lifted her head. The pearls and tassels on her phoenix hairpin trembled slightly. Her razor-sharp gaze pierced me, as if she wished to tear me apart right there. Through clenched teeth, she spat. "Throw her into the Ministry of Justice for severe interrogation." The crown prince's death had stripped her of all reason. As palace maids approached, I quickly knelt down, banging my head on the floor and shouting, "Your Majesty, she's lying. My parents died early, and my family is so poor we can't even afford to eat properly. How could I have the luxury to own a silver hairpin?" I cast a sidelong glance at Sueju and spoke slowly. On the contrary, Sueju's family is wealthy and well-off. I've even seen her own a jewelry box full of gold, silver, and jade. Sueju glared at me, shouting, "You're doomed, Zhao Ran. You dare to frame me? Why admit it and wait to be killed? More than 10 days ago, I saw you take it out and look at it. Since the crown prince was killed, I haven't seen you touch it." She knelt by the empress's feet, pleading earnestly, "Your Majesty, that shameless maid either threw it away or hid it, hoping to have no evidence against her." The empress, annoyed and with a furrowed brow, impatiently scanned us back and forth. If not for the emperor's recent warning and the crown prince's death making killing inadvisable, she would have had us both beaten to death on the spot. I met her gaze without fear. "Your Majesty, if you don't believe it, you may send someone to investigate." After a cup of tea, the empress's personal maid hurried over, whispering a few words into her ear. The empress suddenly became furious and kicked Sueju squarely in the chest. "Shameless maid." Sueju spat blood, helplessly staring at the empress. "You almost fooled me, you shameless maid."
8.
The empress's personal maid brought 2 boxes. She opened one, revealing a few scattered pearl hairpins. "Your Majesty," the maid choked up, holding out a silver hairpin. "This is the murder weapon. It still has faint bloodstains." I had the forensic examiner inspect it, confirming the blood is fresh, matching the time of the crown prince's murder. The empress, like an enraged lioness, grabbed Sueju by the neck, her eyes bloodshot and bulging, screaming madly. "It was you! You killed my son! Who ordered you to do this?" Sueju collapsed to the ground, her eyes bloodshot and bulging, tongue lolling helplessly as she was strangled. "Your Majesty, there's one more thing." The maid opened the other box, revealing a chest full of precious jewelry. The materials and style were far beyond what a lowly maid like me could own. I believe these pieces were made by the Imperial Household Department, and the styles seemed to be those favored by noble consortium. The Empress paused, snatched the box, and examined the contents one by one. "Yes, that damned Shinru." She suddenly trembled like a sieve. Sensing her great revenge was near, she wiped away her tears and shouted, "Quick, take this to the Emperor. I want to see him immediately." That day, the Emperor's Jinui guards dug near the dry well in noble consort Shin's palace and found a voodoo doll pierced with silver needles, inscribed with the crown prince's birth details. With clear motive and evidence, noble consort Shin was immediately banished to the cold palace, and the third prince was exiled to Lingnan. The case of the panicked crown prince's assassination was finally solved. That night, a shadow appeared in my room.
9.
The Princess Royal carried 2 jars of wine and sat down by herself. Her face was filled with the satisfaction of avenging a great grievance. I poured her a cup and sincerely thanked her. "Thank you, Princess, for coming to my aid. I'm deeply grateful." The princess raised an eyebrow at me and took a long drink in one gulp. That night, after I killed the treacherous crown prince and was about to leave, suddenly a female voice sounded behind me. "Just going back like that? How do you explain all this blood on you?" Startled, I held a hairpin across my chest defensively. The princess emerged from the shadows, followed by a maid. Just when I thought I would surely die that day, the princess broke from her usual cold indifference. She smiled gently. "Consort Xianfei, long time no see." I was stunned, staring at her blankly. Consort Xianfei was the title I remembered from my previous life. She quickly got to the point and ordered someone to quietly move the crown prince's body to the imperial garden. I asked in confusion, "Why are you helping me?" She sighed slowly. "In my last life, when everyone pressured me into a political marriage, only you understood the harshness of the northern frontier and risked defending many to plead on my behalf." Grateful, she accepted the warm goose-down cotton jackets and fox fur cloaks I had given her before leaving. She reminded me to stay warm and eat well in the bitter cold of the north. She was the daughter of Empress Xiao and the Emperor. The Xiao family once held great power and prestige, supporting the current emperor's rise from an overlooked prince to the throne. Later, the Xiao clan was framed for rebellion and utterly destroyed. Empress Xiao took her own life in despair. Left alone in the deep palace, her status became precarious. For 3 lifetimes, she was destined for a political marriage to Shili and a lonely death far from home. To escape that fate, after rebirth, she chose to enter the military camp and train in martial arts to earn merit. The moment I opened my eyes this time, I knew that if I wanted to avoid being easily sent away, I needed solid strength. Bathed in moonlight, she downed her cup of fine wine and then looked up, tears shimmering in her eyes. For the first time, I saw on the face of this Iron Lady, who had used thunderous means to keep the northern frontier in line and repeatedly earned military honors, an expression more desperate than death. Before I could ask, she spoke on her own. "My father took back my military command and betrothed me as a secondary wife to Li Taifu's son." The Leaf family was the maternal clan of the 4th prince. Among the emperor's sons, only the 4th prince truly stood out. This was a clear signal to everyone that the 4th prince was the uncontested heir to the crown prince.
What?
I was shocked. Li Taifu's son was infamous in the capital as a spoiled scoundrel who had abused his first 2 wives to death. The princess is talented and heroic. Even Li Taifu himself wouldn't be worthy to tie your shoes, let alone for you to become such an insultingly low-ranked secondary wife. Though called a secondary wife, it was barely a notch above a concubine. How could a noble-born princess endure such disgrace? The princess laughed bitterly. A man who cannot tolerate his own meritorious officials and lawful wife certainly won't allow his daughter, who commands troops and wins battles, to be married off to a foreign land as a burden. He would not tolerate a daughter who wielded real power and repeatedly earned merit becoming a threat, nor having her surpass him. So, he resorted to such a pathetic, humiliating tactic to force her submission. He was incompetent and refused to see anyone, especially his own daughter, outshine him. Seeing me stunned, she came over and patted my shoulder reassuringly. "Don't worry, that scoundrel Li Guangzong can't hurt me. My father is desperate and grasping at straws, trying to bind me with a marriage. What a fool's dream. Ranan, we've been trapped in this nightmare too long." I looked at her, and she met my gaze sincerely. "I will not repeat the fate of my past 2 lives. Will you help me?"
10.
Soon I was assigned to serve before the emperor. Meanwhile, news spread that the princess was to be married as a secondary wife to the eldest son of the Grand Tutor. The palace and the common folk alike were in uproar. Everyone had heard of Li Guangzong's rotten reputation. Just having killed his first 2 wives was reason enough for exile. Most sympathized with the princess. When her bridal sedan passed along Juquet Avenue, many knelt in respect. The once timid and demure girl threw caution to the wind, rushing forward to place hand-embroidered sachets and good luck charms into the sedan. Days later, just as the situation was calming down, another shocking piece of news spread through the capital. The Princess Royal beat Li Guangzong into a cripple. A few young palace maids chatted excitedly. "I heard she broke his leg, terrifying." I heard Li Guangzong's wife, Lady Li, paid respects to the princess, and Li Guangzong saw it. Then he publicly humiliated the princess, saying she was just a concubine. Since the lawful wife was paying respects to a concubine, it embarrassed the Li family. Li Guangzong then struck Lady Li, who lost her footing on the stairs and fainted. Another chimed in. "Good for her?" Hearing this, I hurried to the small kitchen to make a pot of loquat syrup and brought it over. Outside the imperial study, the princess knelt in the courtyard, her back straight and proud like a towering pine. She shouted inside the room, "Father, your daughter is innocent." Li Guangzong bullies men and women alike and has now beaten his wife so severely she is unconscious. I act to rid the people of harm. What wrong is there in that? The emperor was furious, blowing his beard and glaring at her, shaking a finger as he cursed. "Ungrateful daughter. You are married and should honor your husband above all. Fighting and killing in the past was bad enough, but now you dare strike your husband? That's downright treason. Guards." The princess looked at the man she had called father for years, her beautiful eyes full of disappointment. Seeing her stubborn refusal to yield, the emperor yelled at those nearby, "Beat her until she admits her guilt." With that, he swept off his robe in anger and stormed away. Inside the study, the emperor sighed, then picked up a nearby teacup and took a sip, a hint of familiarity washing over him. "This tea," he said suspiciously, looking at me. I hurriedly knelt, lowering my gaze to explain. "Autumn is dry and prone to heatiness. It's the perfect season to eat loquat. Your Majesty has been coughing and fatigued recently. I took the liberty of making loquat syrup with some mint, cooling, sweet, and best for moistening the lungs." The emperor stared into the brown tea. After a long silence, a soft sigh came from above. "Give her 20 strokes of the cane to teach her a lesson, then let her go." The emperor wanted to discipline her, but after 20 strokes, the princess was already bleeding profusely and was carried into a carriage by several palace maids. Military power was handed to the 4th prince, and consort Shu's family rose accordingly. Lady Su, wife of Grand Tutor Li, hated the princess for ruining her precious son and schemed against her behind the scenes. A few days later, the princess developed a fever from an infected wound and lay bedridden, unconscious. Several physicians had visited, but declared her condition hopeless. News spread that the princess was near death, and some even prematurely announced her demise. Rumors spread like wildfire all the way to the border. The Shili people, who had suffered under the princess's iron fist for years, were elated to hear the threat hanging over them had been broken. Soon, outside Shuaja city on the border, thousands of Shili soldiers clad in silver armor and armed with cold spears surged forward menacingly. 11. As Shili once again pressed its siege, another piece of news followed closely. The exiled third prince, having fled to Shili, willingly became the military advisor for Shili's attack against our dynasty. Upon hearing this, the emperor spat out a mouthful of old blood onto the memorial and cursed loudly. "This beast, I will kill him." 10 days had passed since the news arrived. Shuaja city had already fallen. Countless civilians were dead or wounded, with corpses lying everywhere. Truly a hell on earth. The Princess Royal was seriously ill and, having married, was unable to lead troops. 2 years ago, General Chong died in battle, leaving no one fit for command in court for the time being. At this moment, the fourth prince stepped forward. He desperately needed a chance to prove himself and legitimately succeed as crown prince. Resolutely, he accepted the mission to lead troops to suppress the rebels and eliminate the enemy forces. Kneeling before the emperor's throne, he praised himself extravagantly. "The enemy is at the gates. As your son and prince, supported by your salary and the people's sustenance, I do not wish to live in comfort while the enemy invades. I am willing to lead the troops to fight and relieve my father's burden." His words deeply moved the weak emperor lying in bed, who could not help but nod repeatedly in approval. The emperor even promised to immediately appoint him as crown prince once the lost territories were recovered.
12.
Lady Su, using the excuse that the princess needed rest for her illness, placed her in the most secluded part of the residence. The courtyard was dilapidated, covered with fallen leaves and withered grass. The house was dark and damp, shaded from sunlight, and the front steps were coated with thick green moss. Lady Li tended a stove in the courtyard, boiling medicine. The thick smoke often made her cough uncontrollably. Learning that the fourth prince was about to go to war, facing the crown prince of Shili and the exiled third prince who knew our defenses and terrain well, the Princess Royal sneered, "Shili's tricks are many and difficult to deal with. Fourth brother is reckless and arrogant. This battle's outcome is obvious." Indeed, the situation turned out exactly as she predicted. 2 months later, the fourth prince not only failed to regain the lost land but was pushed back, losing 2 cities. He himself was captured by Shili forces, stripped naked, hung on the city wall under the sun, suffering humiliation. Our army's morale took a severe hit. When the battle report arrived, the emperor again spat blood in anger. Only then did everyone remember the princess who was bedridden. The emperor ordered me to send her a message, commanding her to lead troops, defeat the enemy, and recover the lost territory. Seeing the princess lying weak as a breath on her bed in the simple and shabby room, I reported the true situation to the emperor according to the original plan, adding how the Li family bullied and abused the princess during this time, causing her illness and collapse. I exaggerated the story in front of the emperor. This was the moment to use talent. The Li family's behavior not only delayed the war efforts but also openly insulted the royal family. The emperor was furious and immediately sentenced the entire Li family to exile for abusing the princess. The princess was brought back into the palace to rest and recuperate. Lady Li was spared punishment for her care of the princess and was promoted to a third-rank gentlewoman, rewarded with 100 taels of gold and given a residence. After a few days of recovery, the princess took troops to the battlefield. Like a breaking storm, she broke through barriers with her years of experience, devastating the enemy completely. One victory report after another arrived. Finally, within Shuaja city, she personally executed the Shili crown prince who had ordered the massacre and the third prince who had defected to Shili. When the princess returned triumphant, the emperor was already gravely ill, lying in bed gasping for air, with only his mouth still able to move. 13. At the sickbed, the old emperor, 1 foot already in the coffin, watched the princess approaching with a bowl of medicine, murmuring repeatedly, "This kingdom is mine, no one can take it away." The princess sat quietly by the bed, stirring the hot medicinal broth with a spoon. Her eyes darkened with turmoil. "Father, when you allowed the empress and the noble consort's maternal family to slander the Shao family and frame mother, did you ever think it would lead to this day?" The emperor's bloodshot eyes trembled as he glared at her with increasing fear, yet stubbornly replied, "I rule the country. I don't trust her as empress. She dares to defy me. Shao Qingyan, just a general, yet praised by the people as a god? I am the true emperor of Nanxi." The princess' eyes turned red, tears welling. "My uncle guards the frontier, suppressing bandits and pacifying wars, serving the people faithfully for years without slack. Why is he undeserving of the people's praise?" She continued to feed him medicine without pause. "Instead, you are arrogant and arbitrary, persecuting meritorious ministers and generals. The Shao family must be blind to support you as emperor. If he had not slaughtered the loyal ministers and forced the deaths of the generals, the court would not be without capable men in the face of a great enemy. In previous lives, once noble and exalted, she would not have ended up toyed with by enemy princes and frozen to death in a sheep pen during harsh winters." The spoon scraped slowly across his mouth. The medicine mixed with blood soaked the pillow. The princess gave him the last spoonful, looking down at him with a slight smirk. "In 2 days, I will ascend the throne. Father, you'd better watch carefully and share in the good fortune." The old emperor's eyes widened in rage as he struggled to rise, gasping curses. "You wretched woman! Not fulfilling your duties as a wife, daring to claim my throne. Someone." The princess turned away, unwilling to hear more. "Someone?" I stepped forward to cover him with a blanket and whispered in his ear. "The crown prince was killed resisting a palace maid. The third prince betrayed the country. The fourth prince was captured and hung on the city wall for 3 days, his backside still marked. Forgive my bluntness, but your precious sons are not as good as the princess. Now you have someone who can hold the realm. Just quietly enjoy it." The emperor listened blankly, his cloudy old eyes suddenly cleared a bit. He grabbed at me as if clutching a lifeline, trembling and pointing. "I never told anyone the crown prince's cause of death. How did you find out?" I smiled slightly. "Guess." His body shook violently, clutching the bed edge and struggling to get up. Someone. No one answered at the door. His hoarse screams echoed like a dragon trapped on a shallow reef, until finally, in defeat, he lowered his arms. 14. The princess defeated Shili and saved countless civilians. Her ascension to the throne was well-deserved. Few opposed her in court. The Shao family's grievances were cleared, and all the generals and ministers who had died from suspicion were posthumously vindicated. At the same time, the empress established girls' academies throughout the land, abolished bad customs, and allowed girls to study alongside boys, learning literacy and taking imperial exams. She encouraged women to engage in commerce, politics, and medicine. She revised and completed the laws, strictly punishing trafficking, abuse, and harm to young girls without mercy. Several years later, Nanxi produced its first female top scholar, whose talent and demeanor matched any man. Afterwards, the first female merchants, chefs, doctors, and generals sprang up like bamboo shoots after rain. Women's status was no longer crushed to the dust. No longer were princesses sent abroad for political marriages. The empress asked me what my future plans were. I thought for a moment and replied, "Your Majesty, I hope for a house of my own, 1,000 taels of gold, and a dog and a civet cat to keep me company." Married life meant serving a whole family. This blessing I would leave to others. The emperor smiled and agreed. From then on, I lived in the capital with wealth and a home, servants accompanying me when I went out, and cats and dogs greeting me at home.